Respected Khenpo, fellow Dharma brothers and sisters, good afternoon, everyone. I am a graduate student from the Department of Electronics at Peking University. Today, I feel very honored to receive Khenpo's guidance and to listen to your teachings. I have a question I'd like to ask Khenpo. I feel that sometimes I am indecisive when doing things. How can I continuously strengthen my determination and courage? At the same time, how is this kind of courage different from being reckless and impulsive, acting without considering the consequences? It brings some negative effects to myself and also to those around me. How can we use wisdom to distinguish between the two? So I would like to ask Khenpo about this. Thank you, Khenpo.
In this way, whatever actions we take or important decisions we make, we should always first carefully observe and thoroughly examine with our mind. What will be the potential consequences and outcomes of doing this? During the entire process of doing it, will there be any unforeseen negative impacts or harmful effects? People in today's society are just like this. Whether running a successful business or accomplishing things for oneself and others, they focus primarily on the positive side and are often unprepared for the negative aspects that arise. Some people even simply refuse to think about such things. For example, what if perhaps we die someday? What if we eventually grow old? What if we suddenly fall seriously ill right now? On the surface, these things may seem very inauspicious, but they are things we must face in life. So in Buddhism, not only the positive, but also the negative aspects are given considerable thought. In this way, those who practice Buddhism, when they actually encounter these situations in life in the future, will have the courage and ability to face them. So I think that when doing anything, considering things beforehand is very important. In the past, the renowned and respected Tibetan scholar Sakya Pandita Kunga Gyaltsen once said, "A fool reflects after the fact, a wise person reflects beforehand." In other words, a wise person calmly and carefully considers first what the consequences will be if I accomplish this matter, what obstacles might arise during this process, the ways to achieve success, and the final benefits, as well as how to give back to society, and so on, considering all these things in advance. Therefore, we believe that the first step is to observe thoroughly. At the same time, our hopes and goals are good. However, we should also be prepared and have well-considered plans in place for any unfavorable outcomes. We also need to carefully take into account both the positive and the negative aspects of it.
Thank you, Khenpo. Thank you.
I am a doctoral student in the Department of Philosophy at Peking University. My major is Chinese philosophy. I've always had a lingering question that has stayed with me for as long as I can remember. All of our Chinese traditions, including Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism, are all about seeking inwardly. We seek spiritual peace and really have little demand for material things. But in today's modern society, even if China alone is peaceful and harmonious, in the process of economic globalization, we may not ask for much from others, but some powerful countries come with planes and cannons, they have their own demands, and they plunder our natural resources. If we can see through it all and let go, does that mean we should just let them plunder us as they wish?
It's not really like that. Not all Chinese people actually choose to become monks and see through worldly things. That's impossible, and it's not necessary either. What I mean is, while material civilization is highly developed and advanced in many aspects, in this era, we must pay attention to our own ethics and morality, to our own conscience, and to our traditional culture, which is deeply rooted in our history. These must truly be valued and appreciated. Otherwise, even among our intellectuals today, there are fewer and fewer people who genuinely value and respect their own traditional culture. If this continues, our cherished traditions and our religions in other countries and regions, they have already been adopted. And they have been used with great success. For example, the teachings of Laozi, Confucius, and Mencius from Han region. In countries like South Korea, Singapore, the United States, and Canada, people benefit from them immensely. Yet it is worth noting that their origins are actually in Han region. It's just like Indian Buddhism. Indian Buddhism, for the most part, was transmitted to Han region, Tibetan area, and Western countries. But in India itself, it has now been overtaken by Brahmanism. As for authentic Buddhism, it is Tibetan Buddhism in Tibet. that has gone back to India to promote itself. This is the situation now. So, at a certain point, when it comes to traditional culture in Han Chinese regions, it's very possible that Americans or Koreans will be invited to help restore these traditions. This is a shameful thing, so we do not demand that everyone give up their pursuit of material things. That's not what we're saying. As ordinary lay people, it's perfectly right and acceptable to do business, to earn and make money. Just don't seek it through illegal, unethical, or unreasonable means and methods. Because now the whole world is keeping up with the times and progressing together. At such a time, if many people just look inward and do nothing at all, they might be eliminated by history or discriminated against by others. This is possible. But while we certainly value material things, I think we should also truly value our inner spirit. If we blindly set all our goals solely on money and material possessions, the sense of fear inside us will only grow stronger. So in this regard, there should be a balanced development.
Thank you, Khenpo. I have another question, which is about the current religious conflicts. Because different people have different beliefs and perspectives, and many wars are caused by these differences. For example, in the Middle East, most conflicts are primarily about ethnicity and religion, while faith brings us spiritual comfort and reassurance. Conflicts can also arise between different beliefs. What is your view on this issue?
Okay. There are many different religions worldwide, each with their own distinct beliefs and practices. There are also serious conflicts that can occur within different religions themselves, as well as between believers and non-believers of various faiths. This is indeed a phenomenon that we see quite often and frequently nowadays. But as a Buddhist practitioner, I would like to explain this from the perspective of Buddhist thought. In Buddhism, we have never used our own religious beliefs as a starting point to launch any kind of war or conflict. This was actually officially recognized and acknowledged in 2009 at an important international religious seminar held in Geneva. Moreover, at that event, the world's best award was given to Buddhism at the time. Why did Buddhism receive this award at that particular moment in history? The recipient of the award was selected through a democratic process. After the selection, Buddhism was ultimately chosen. The reason Buddhism received the award was also explained by the head of the organizing committee. Looking at the history of Buddhism, it has never initiated any war for its own sake. Therefore, as Buddhists, we should embrace all sentient beings with a vast and compassionate heart, treating them all equally. Of course, if someone does not study Buddhism well, internal conflicts may arise. Some improper behaviors internally are inevitable, but they do not represent Buddhism as a whole. So, I personally think and believe that conflicts and disputes between different religions are actually the actions and behaviors of a small minority within those particular religions. They cannot represent all of the various different religions in the world as being in conflict internally.
Thank you, Khenpo.
I am a graduate from the School of Journalism and Communication at Peking University. The question I want to ask is this. In the past 30 years of economic development, people's spiritual lives have become barren. Now, gradually, the country is actually becoming more open regarding personal beliefs. In fact, it is loosening restrictions. With over 1 billion people in China, it has become a vast space. Some even believe it is a huge market for faith. Not only is Buddhism experiencing a revival, but Christianity is as well, and at the same time, around the world. I read a report saying that thousands of cults are also eyeing China, and they've already infiltrated China through various means. There are even a large number of such books being published in many bookstores, and some of these books, I can't go into details here, but in fact, they are books from those sects. I was chatting with a professor, and he said, even many leaders at the State Administration for Religious Affairs may not be aware of these situations. Actually, some of these books are from cults. So I want to ask a question. What is the simplest way to distinguish between orthodox religions and cults? Because personally, I feel that cults, for example, they use crude methods to amass wealth, exploit people sexually, or control individuals. These are relatively easy to identify. But what about the more sophisticated methods? I've noticed once someone enters a belief system, they fall in a cycle. If you're not doing well, it's probably because you're not quite devout enough in your faith. If you continue to believe devoutly, the problem will eventually be resolved. It becomes something that can't be falsified. So is there any simple way to quickly distinguish between orthodox religions and cults? That's the question I want to ask.
All right. Here's the important thing to understand. Many different religions in our modern world today, as I just clearly mentioned before, they should all have a very positive and beneficial influence and positive impact in encouraging and motivating people to do good deeds and actions. In today's modern society and culture, it's absolutely true that most people in China feel spiritually empty and lost inside of their heart. Various religions are actively trying to take advantage of this particular time period to gain influence and infiltrate. In other words, they want to occupy and control people's hearts and minds completely. This is exactly what many different religions ultimately aim and strive for today. But generally speaking, if something clearly and obviously goes against people's deeply held inner sense of what is right and what is wrong, that is, if it runs completely counter to basic human morality and ethics, the exact opposite of it, even if such a harmful religion manages to exist and persist in your life for a while temporarily, or even if it manages to infiltrate your soul, rest assured it certainly won't stay for long. Ultimately, the progress of human history will gradually eliminate it. It simply won't last in the long run. Since ancient times, the major religions of the world, even today, they continue to flourish and continue to spread throughout both Eastern and Western cultures. So I truly believe that in a broader and more comprehensive sense, the major religions should strive to coexist harmoniously, peacefully, and respectfully. Many eminent monks and great masters abroad also advocate for the harmonious coexistence of the 9 major religions. Many great spiritual masters and teachers in Tibetan Buddhism, regardless of whether it's Christianity or Catholicism, Islam, Buddhism, and all their religious scholars and devoted followers worldwide, and everyone is jointly carrying out and performing their own unique religious rituals and spiritual practices together. This is a very positive and encouraging sign of the ongoing development and continued growth of religious faith. Between religions, in my personal view, honestly, there should not be conflict or mutual exclusion. For example, if Buddhism claims our Buddhism is the true religion and other religions are heretical, or says Christianity is heretical or Islam is heretical, we shouldn't say that. The distinction between heretical and orthodox, in fact, if a teaching has no effect on a person's physical or mental well-being, or is even harmful, then that teaching is called heresy. But many of the religions that exist in the world today not only do no harm to humanity, but actually have a particularly positive and virtuous influence. We all know, for example, that Confucianism, in terms of its moral constraints, everyone knows what kind of impact it has. Christianity, for example, has built hospitals and schools in various places and has also carried out charitable work. These are truly wonderful things that people would otherwise not have access to. As I mentioned before, there's the famous Mother Teresa from the Catholic Church. Mother Teresa was a very ordinary and humble believer at first. She began spreading and sharing her faith at the young age of 12, and she helped and served those in need throughout her life. In just 6 short years, she helped more than 10,000 people each year. For an ordinary person, it's almost unimaginable for one individual to achieve this. Even for us Mahayana Buddhists, sometimes in comparison to her, I feel quite ashamed. Therefore, I personally think it's best and most beneficial for us religious followers to unite and work with one another harmoniously. There's absolutely no need to mix up our own distinct sects or viewpoints, nor is there any need to reject or exclude others. However, it is reasonable to establish your own sect based on your own teachings. There are also many different sects among Buddhists today. Some say I am from the Nyingma school, or I am from the Gelug school. The Gelug school establishes its own views and claims its theories are correct. The Nyingma school also establishes its own views and presents its own theories. But this is reasonable. You can't think that one is true and the other is false. So in the past, throughout history, people simply didn't really understand or know each other well enough, especially in those days. That's why so many ugly incidents have occurred in history. Religious followers have sometimes killed, condemned, and denounced each other. None of this was necessary at all. So, in the present day, any religion that truly benefits humanity is considered a righteous religion. Any religion that is not conducive to the overall healthy development of humanity is considered an evil cult. But whether this is truly the case should be determined through people's wisdom and analysis. It can't be decided by just one person whether something is a righteous religion or an evil cult. Very good. Today there are certainly many intellectuals here, and I am confident as well.
Hello, Khenpo. Hello, everyone. It is nice to see you all. I am a third-year student at Minzu University of China, and I am currently studying Chinese painting. I have a question. I just started learning about Buddhism, and during the process of studying it, I feel like my heart is becoming more and more constricted, but I don't know why. Maybe sometimes I do feel a bit affected by the idea of karmic retribution, occasionally wondering about its impact. My heart feels increasingly tense. I'm not sure how to handle this situation. I'm not as lively and relaxed as I used to be. Thank you, Khenpo.
What should we do about this? Now, I'm honestly feeling a bit nervous too. Is it having an actual tangible effect? It seems so indeed. I personally think there might be two main underlying reasons why you can't fully relax your mind completely right now. The first primary reason is just exactly as you mentioned yourself earlier. Sometimes certain karmic forces and energies from your past lives can still be felt and experienced in this present life as well. For example, it's specifically mentioned in the famous commentary on the Abhidharma Kosha. In this current life, if we deliberately kill small insects, throw them away carelessly, and let them die in fear and suffering, then in my next life, I will always have a deep sense of panic and anxiety in my heart constantly. This feeling of panic can't be cured by taking medicine, nor by seeing a doctor, and even reciting rituals may not necessarily work. Because some people have to carry the karma of their entire life on their own. When you must bear it, other external conditions may not necessarily have any effect. So perhaps, I personally think, it might be closely related to karma from previous lives. If that's truly the case, reciting some confession texts regularly can gradually eliminate it over time. That's one effective approach. Another is that as we age naturally, according to various aspects of our lifestyle adjustments and habits, the phenomenon of mood swings is not something unique to you alone. Many people may find themselves in a generally good state for a period of time, and then, after a while, feel especially down for a while. There are these ups and downs, these fluctuations that we all experience. So, when this happens, after carefully adjusting your lifestyle, your mindset will gradually return to how it was before, relaxed, carefree, and at ease.
Thank you very much, Khenpo.
Hello, Khenpo. I am a graduate student from the School of Software at Peking University. I've already graduated and am now a software engineer. I have two questions, both of which are quite practical. The first issue I encounter in my daily life is this. When I try to guide my parents toward believing in Buddhism, I run into a problem. Right now, I'm explaining to them the principles of good deeds bring good results, bad deeds bring bad results, and the 6 realms of reincarnation. They more easily accept that good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. But when I mention the 6 realms of reincarnation, they tend to refute my view like this. They say, as long as I live well in this life, that's enough for me. I don't really care about the next life. I know this is a mistaken viewpoint, but I honestly don't know how to refute this kind of thinking. I truly want them to spend less time on entertainment and instead learn more about Buddhism. This is something that really troubles me right now because I feel that the greatest act of filial piety I can offer them now is to guide them to believe in Buddhism. But I feel that my strength is not enough, and sometimes I feel very sad inside. This is a problem.
Your intention regarding this issue is truly admirable. Because indeed, many filial sons and daughters, if they truly and sincerely want to repay their parents' kindness, generally speaking, according to the Mahayana Buddhist perspective, guiding parents to have faith and to practice virtuous deeds is truly the right way to repay their kindness. However, people in the world do not always necessarily see it this way. They think that once you grow up, as long as you provide your parents with a house or make sure they have enough to eat and wear, that's enough. But this way of repaying kindness only lasts a few years and is soon gone. So I think this method is truly something to be happy about, honestly, in my opinion. However, they may find it easier to accept the idea that good deeds are rewarded and bad deeds are punished. Perhaps they only acknowledge that in this life, doing bad things will bring bad consequences. They may not necessarily accept that good deeds will be rewarded in future lives. I've analyzed this before as well. Many Chinese celebrities, famous people, and literary giants believe in Buddhism and call themselves Buddhists. Today, many celebrities and some leaders also believe in Buddhism, but in reality, their belief is mainly about good deeds being rewarded and bad deeds punished. They think that if I do good deeds in this life, I might immediately receive blessings. That's the kind of mindset they have. Truly believing in Buddhism means believing in the existence of both this life and future lives. This perspective is very important. If they think that what happens in the next life, in their opinion, doesn't really matter, this is truly an unreasonable way of thinking. Why? Because if that's really the case, then I wouldn't care about what happens after tomorrow. As long as I'm happy today, that's enough. Live for today, drink while there's wine available, just live freely in the moment like that, and it's perfectly all right and fine, just as it is. You shouldn't think, I need to prepare for next year or for when I get old. Don't buy health insurance and don't buy retirement insurance. Simply, just live for today and that's enough. So when we humans don't consider the next life at all, we're only focused on what's right in front of us. In fact, this is actually a very narrow and extremely short-sighted point of view. But to change all at once can be somewhat difficult. If you keep working at it over the long term, at a certain point, in my experience, some children, not just after a year or two, but after more than 10 years of effort, in the end, their parents also become very devout believers. There are such cases, so keep working hard, keep it up.
All right, thank you. The second question is, yesterday at my company, since we can access our company's website in Japan, we discovered there were some pornographic images. I felt uncomfortable about it, so I discussed it with colleagues. I said, what we're doing is wrong. This will poison young people. They replied, these pornographic images can't be found in China. Only people in Japan and within our company can access them. I said, but this is still harming Japanese youth. They said Japanese youth wouldn't be harmed by this kind of thing. So I kept discussing it with them, and as the discussion went on, I truly felt that no one else agreed with my point of view. They really thought these images could attract traffic. Traffic can be turned into money, but honestly, I think we should truly be able to relinquish this and do the right thing instead. I really don't know how I should view this particular issue. Specifically, the issue of pornographic images.
They think, why wouldn't this harm Japanese people, after all?
Because the Japanese, notably, have produced a lot of pornographic content, right?
That's not necessarily true. Actually, Chinese people have produced quite a lot as well. That's how it is. I think when it comes to this issue, people nowadays, everyone simply has different values. There might not be a definitive standard for it either. Overall, whether Japanese or Chinese, we are all sentient beings as individuals. From the perspective of Mahayana Buddhist teachings, some people especially hate Americans and Japanese. In the past, there were always people who harbored such feelings deep inside. This was certainly true in the 1960s and 70s, or even in the last century. Indeed, during those times, there were all kinds of different conflicts and disputes that occurred between various countries. That was during wartime, but for those of us here today, we are now living in an era of international cooperation. At this particular time, I think that as long as you have breath in you, as long as you have some ability, no matter which country a person is from, no matter their ethnicity or skin color, we should use our great deep love and compassion to truly help all sentient beings as much as possible. Because in Buddhism, we talk about bodhicitta, and in fact, bodhicitta is great love. The love in the world today is limited to just one kind, such as between myself and my family members, or between myself and my colleagues at work. It's just a small and simple love, but this kind of love can gradually expand and grow to even include all of humanity in the world, and then further to all sentient beings everywhere. Such love will truly bring a deep and lasting happiness to the very depths of our own hearts. In fact, nowadays, some scientists, by carefully observing and studying the human brain, are beginning to reveal more about how these feelings of love and happiness are connected, have found that the human brain is most suited to altruism and loving, helping others. It is the most natural and the most in line with the fundamental laws of nature. If you transmit another kind of message, such as selfishness, it inevitably brings suffering. This is not only taught in Buddhism, it has also now been observed and confirmed in science. The direction we humans should take is to consciously cultivate the power to help and love others. This kind of power is very appropriate. If someone has this mindset of loving all beings and truly loving others, they will always be happy and content, even if what they do is not successful. They will feel that they have a clear conscience, that they have done their best to help. But if this love is turned inward towards oneself, if it is self-directed, even towards your own family members, you say things like, "You treat me unfairly, you let me down, I did this and that for you." When everything is focused on yourself, life becomes very unhappy. So the most crucial issue for us is this. Love is something that we choose to give to others. It's not really about whether or not others love us in return. When we think this way, everything we do becomes very painful. So I think you also always try your very best to support and assist others in the company here, in any way you can, whether they're Japanese or Chinese. Everyone can feel it. No one wants to experience pain. When I look carefully at Japanese and Chinese people's bodies and skin color closely, they're basically the same and very similar. So for many ordinary Japanese people, sometimes they don't even need to show their passports. People just assume they're Chinese. So in terms of actual feelings and emotions, maybe whether it's yellow, red, or white skin color, there really isn't much significant difference at all in reality.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Hello, Khenpo Sodargye. I'm a doctoral student in religious studies at Peking University. I have two questions. First, could you please give us a brief introduction to the development of Tibetan Buddhism in Han regions and your assessment of its current situation? Nowadays, many people in Han regions are studying the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment by Master Tsongkhapa. I'd like to ask you to introduce the status of this treatise within Buddhism. And also, could you share some advice for people in Han regions who are studying this treatise? Thank you.
I personally think that Tibetan Buddhism in the Han regions now has a great potential, an opportunity to flourish widely and prosper. Because, as I mentioned earlier before, so-called Buddhism is not just solely about formality and external rituals. If it were only about formality alone, there are many Tibetan Buddhist temples being built in Han regions and many activities taking place. These particular things are not necessarily always permitted, but as time goes on, gradually, including eminent monks and great masters of Han Buddhism, as well as some intellectuals in Han regions, you will gradually and slowly come to understand the unique qualities and special characteristics of Tibetan Buddhism. This understanding will progressively develop over time. Just now, when we were chatting with some Dharma friends, we mentioned that in 1987, when the Dharma king, the wish-fulfilling jewel, came to Beijing, at that particular time, there were basically no people actively propagating Tibetan Buddhism in Beijing. Back then, when people like us, wearing these kinds of robes, appeared in department stores, all the staff members in the room were extremely surprised. They stopped working and just stood there, completely still, staring at us. They thought aliens had arrived, but when some Americans or foreigners came, no one was surprised at all. Because in Beijing, even though it wasn't as open as it is now, it was still quite accessible and open to foreign visitors and expatriates at that time. But when we showed up, everyone was especially astonished. Sometimes we even wondered ourselves what kind of strange creatures we had become. Even when we were among other people, everyone seemed so astonished by us. But that's no longer the case today. Nowadays, in Tibetan area, there are many eminent monks, great masters, and respected teachers. And through various channels, more and more people have come to understand Tibetan Buddhism. In addition, many eminent monks and Buddhist practitioners from the Han regions have also gone to Tibetan area to study, facilitating communication between the two sides. When it comes to studying and learning the Dharma teachings, everyone now has a very good and clear path to follow closely. In the future ahead, this will continue to deepen and expand, and gradually, indeed, more and more people will come to understand the Dharma, which is truly something to be happy about. Buddhism is really a kind of education for the mind. To be honest, that's how I often think of it. So it's a form of education for the heart. If people find true happiness and receive genuine, real benefit from the Dharma, then that special place is truly where the Dharma flourishes. So I believe that in the future, through CDs and all kinds of modern scientific and technological devices, and with the joint efforts of many intellectuals, we will have many opportunities for everyone to work together to promote Buddhism, which is so beneficial to humanity. That's what I think about the first question. As for the second question, it's about the stages of the path to enlightenment. The stages of the path to enlightenment was written by Master Tsongkhapa. In the earliest days, Master Fazun translated it. He was an outstanding translator in the Han region, and it was truly not easy for him to enter Tibetan area. He translated a great many treatises. Perhaps during his lifetime this was not fully recognized. But after his passing, people came to realize the profound gratitude owed to him by sentient beings in the Han region for his translations. Since his translation, later on, Master Rijiang from Taiwan also taught it to others. Khenpo Yikshi from our Buddhist Institute has also taught it as well. Now, major Buddhist institutes in the Han region, including some universities, are studying it as well. In fact, studying the stages of the path to enlightenment is truly very important. The entire sequence of the path to enlightenment has already been explained very clearly. In our Nyingma tradition, there is also the great perfection, resting in the nature of mind. In fact, great perfection, resting in the nature of mind, simply adds another layer of Vajrayana stages. But in essence, this practice is basically the same. Therefore, I personally feel that studying the stages of the path to enlightenment is truly worthy of praise. Moreover, in the latter part of the stages of the path to enlightenment, including the section on superior insight, it may be rather difficult to understand. When Master Tsongkhapa composed it at the time, he felt that the meaning was so profound that no one could truly comprehend it. Later, Manjushri Bodhisattva personally appeared and told him, "You can continue writing, there is no problem, you will definitely attain understanding." So I feel that using the stages of the path to enlightenment as a foundation for everyone to study together should bring tremendous benefit.
Thank you so much, Khenpo. Hello, Khenpo. I am a doctoral student in Sanskrit at the Department of South Asian Studies, Peking University. I am quite interested in the practice of Dzogchen. I would like to request Khenpo to give an introduction. Thank you.
What did you say? I didn't quite catch that just now.
The practice of Dzogchen, I would like to ask Khenpo to introduce it.
Oh, I can't transmit it right now.
Then just give a brief introduction.
All right, a brief introduction here now. It's like this. Dzogchen, actually among the 9 vehicles, according to the Vajrayana perspective and tradition, is considered the highest and most supreme state. Why is it considered the highest state exactly? Because the methods and practices of Dzogchen are extremely simple and direct in nature. It is especially suited to the psychology of modern society. As we know, in today's world, if there are too many theories and too many scriptures to study and contemplate, it is very difficult to do so in a short human life. I remember that His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok, when he went to Boston in the United States, at a center in Boston, he once said, that nowadays, currently, Dzogchen is the most suitable for modern people, especially for people like you, living and working in such a busy and vibrant city. Then a doctoral student who was present at that moment asked, "Why is it that we, people living in busy cities, need it the most?" At that time, His Holiness said, "Because if you want to extensively study and contemplate a vast amount of teachings, it may be quite difficult to do so within a short human life. But with Dzogchen, relying on one's own unique faith and the direct pointing out instructions from the Master, those with the right karmic connection can indeed attain realization on the spot. Even if you don't attain realization immediately, you can still recognize the true nature of your mind through a very simple method. When you understand this principle, every other Dharma teaching is like being on the peak of a high mountain, where you can see all the surrounding mountains at a glance. Everything is right before your eyes. So this kind of realization is truly important for people today. Therefore, in Tibetan area, a very renowned great master and practitioner once said, "When the darkness of sentient beings in the increasingly degenerate age becomes ever more rampant and pervasive, the radiant light of Dzogchen shines ever brighter. So the more degenerate the world becomes, the more sentient beings truly need the extraordinary methods of Vajrayana and the essential pith instructions of Dzogchen."
Thank you.
I am a PhD graduate from the Department of Philosophy at Peking University, and I am currently doing my postdoctoral research. I would like to ask Khenpo a question. Whenever we do something, we inevitably have to deal with certain things.
For example, whether it's running a business or building a monastery, I feel that in some ways they are actually quite similar. That is, you need to gather some important resources and make certain thoughtful judgments. You also have to eliminate all kinds of distractions and disturbances during the entire process. How can we do things well and successfully without increasing our greed and strong sense of duality unnecessarily? I personally think that doing things in the world and spiritual practice are not in conflict at all, but how to harmonize and balance the two effectively is a rather practical and important question. Another related point is that I actually went to Qinghai last year, and I found that Tibetans and Han Chinese have very different attitudes and perspectives toward wealth and money. This is also closely related to the previous question. So, how do people in Tibetan area actually view the meaning and purpose of pursuing a career in accumulating wealth? All right, thank you very much, Khenpo.
For the first question raised earlier, no matter what we do in the world today, or even when building temples or other sacred Buddhist sites, all require various conditions and circumstances to come together harmoniously and peacefully. I personally think that when many people are pursuing their careers or doing anything in life, everyone feels that what they are doing is very important. In our daily lives, we meet many people, and during conversations, they only talk about their own work and don't let others speak. They never ask questions either, they just keep talking about their own matters. So this also demonstrates that people tend to place a special importance and value on their own work. But in the process of valuing it, we should try not to develop any discriminating thoughts, feelings of anger, or desires rooted in greed. Of course, this is a fundamental and basic principle for how we should conduct ourselves in daily life and handle various matters. In principle, it should be this way. But in reality, can people truly achieve this completely? That really depends on each individual person's abilities, their own expectations, or their unique character, all of which are different. For example, in Tibetan regions and within Tibetan Buddhism, there are indeed many places where temples are built. Some temples are built and constructed through very legitimate and proper means, with merit and blessings accumulated, and some major benefactors and donors whose generous donations naturally make it possible and feasible. But there are also some unfortunate cases that may bring unpleasantness and discomfort, such as various forms of soliciting alms aggressively. Such negative phenomena, on the contrary, tarnish and damage the sacred aspect of Tibetan Buddhism significantly. People think and assume that Tibetan Buddhism is all about soliciting alms constantly, that Tibetan Buddhism is all about asking for money repeatedly. Nowadays, this kind of perspective or view still exists in some places. Such views do have some impact on genuine, authentic Buddhism. Why do I say this? Because, as I just mentioned, Buddhism is not just about building a temple or constructing a stupa or erecting a truly magnificent and splendid golden building as a symbol. If it were just a symbol, then even after Buddhism disappeared, the scripture halls could still remain. Actually, in fact, that's not the case. It is really a place for Buddhism, a spiritual site. Everyone present here is all gathering in this place today, but maybe we don't even like this building. We come here and you might think, I've studied the Dharma in Tibetan area for a very long time, and wonder whether there will be some new exchange of ideas in his mind. You're not here because my physical appearance is good. It's not like that. It's just that I've been involved in Buddhist studies for a relatively long time. So with this, we are willing to communicate with each other, and that's actually how it is. As for the architecture of Peking University, I'm not particularly envious of the physical bodies of everyone at Peking University either, but I think there must be a truly distinctive intellectual atmosphere here. This is very important. So as we just discussed about Tibetan Buddhism has a very profound system of thought. Many people regret not having fully understood this, and as a result, what you just mentioned, some things that come through improper means, this also happens in our society. Originally, when doing something, it should be done well, but the person in charge engages in corruption and does things through various illegal means. In the end, they deceive themselves and others, causing harm to both themselves and others. This kind of phenomenon exists. So in the future, we need to analyze things from both sides. Otherwise, it will lead to undesirable consequences. That's one aspect. The second important aspect is, in our Tibetan region and areas, there are indeed quite a significant number of people. They don't place as much importance and emphasis on wealth as people do in big modern cities. Especially some elderly people and seniors. All their happiness and joy comes from their deep faith and devotion, and they live very joyfully and contentedly. Even though their material conditions and circumstances are just average and modest, a single meal in the city could easily support a dozen or so of them comfortably for a month or even several months. But the happiness and joy they feel deep within their hearts is truly far greater than that of wealthy, powerful people who live in the city. So as the ancients said, being rich does not necessarily mean being blessed. The first few character refers to material wealth, while the second few character refers to inner happiness. Therefore, people have a certain deep feeling and understanding in their hearts and minds. As Buddhism teaches, being content with little desire brings a sense of satisfaction. If you have a sense of satisfaction, everything feels more joyful. But nowadays, people in the world lack this sense of satisfaction. If you have one car, you want to buy a second one. If you have two cars, you might find yourself wanting three, and the quality keeps getting higher and higher. Your pursuit is only focused on the positive aspects. You don't see or notice the side effects or negative aspects and consequences. Therefore, I personally believe and think that because of the strong faith in Mahayana Buddhism in Tibetan area, people's sense and feeling of happiness there may far surpass that of big modern cities significantly. The source of this is altruism, and also the fact that they have had their faith since childhood. Of course, in Tibetan area, there is also a considerable number of young people. They are now starting to gradually enter society for the very first time. These people are even more reckless than those in Han Chinese cities. There are indeed such people. Some of them I know personally. They have no faith at all, and even regularly frequent and visit many improper places. Because Han Chinese people from a young age are generally more indifferent to many things. They have, over time, become used to them. But when some people arrive in a new city, they feel that external material pleasures seem like matters of utmost indulgence to them, so they pursue them desperately and persistently. There are also some people like this.
Hello to all the students. It is great to be here. Let me introduce myself first. I am from the School of Physics at Peking University. I am currently a postdoctoral researcher specializing in biomedical engineering. Because of this particular experience, some of the fascinating phenomena that I observe may be a bit different from what everyone else sees. I will talk about this in a moment. The question I want to ask the Venerable is also related to this experience. The question might be a bit long, so I ask for everyone's patience, because this question is rather complex. First of all, it's like this. Some time ago, I was also profoundly inspired by Buddhism and influenced by it to some extent. Personally, I think Buddhism is very good. So, my very first thought was, in my company, when I first considered this, in the future, I don't want everyone to care only about money. There should be a kind of faith, a sense of conscience and morality in their hearts. Venerable, what do you think I should do to help them have in their hearts? Not necessarily to fully believe in Buddhism or in things like reincarnation. I don't think that's something I can necessarily achieve, but at the very least, they should have some conscience and humanity. My second question is related to my own experience. Because of some professional matters, I've come into contact with some things that are perhaps relatively darker. Let me give a few examples. For instance, when people get their cars repaired nowadays, what most people don't know is that a lot of the time the car isn't actually broken or it just has a minor issue. But what happens is they remove and replace all your good parts and give you ones that are already old or no longer work. Sometimes, for example, the brakes are actually fine, but replacing the entire brake system is very profitable, and some mechanics, they're just out to make the replacement. They'll even pour alcohol into your brake fluid to dissolve it. That way, after you drive for a while, over time, your brakes are bound to stop working properly. In fact, many fatal accidents on highways are caused by this kind of thing. People who aren't in the industry really have a hard time knowing about these inside stories. Let me give another example. In our field of biomedical engineering, at the beginning, because we dealt with cancer quite a lot, we kept talking about how to check for cancer and how to cure it. But later, we quickly realized that nowadays cancer is becoming more and more common. And for other major diseases as well, the trend of earlier onset is getting worse. Eventually, I slowly came to understand that there are actually many illnesses that doctors simply can't cure. Why is that? Because in the food we eat every day, and even in other things, there are many carcinogens or substances that cause cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases. These chemicals, which can cause liver and kidney failure, are widely used. For now, we have no way to control it. Let me give you a number and you'll understand. Food is one aspect, but even just looking at indoor building materials, according to statistics from hospitals in Beijing, 80% of children and teenagers who develop leukemia had home renovations within 6 months before they got sick. I can't say this data is 100% accurate, but it's approximately at this scale. Right now, in our country, currently regarding the standards for indoor building materials, actually, I've looked into this a bit myself. For example, after you finish renovating, what counts as passing the standard? If no major illnesses occur within a few years, then it's considered qualified. But think about it. If you end up with a serious illness and you look back 10 or 20 years, people don't just live for 4 or 5 years. So now what I feel is that simply pursuing economic benefits and personal material possessions and personal gain, I personally feel that, in my opinion, it seems like many people have really reached a point of madness. They completely disregard others, even their lives. In this particular situation, my main concern is how can we, under these current circumstances, rely on ourselves or on the power of everyone coming together to at least spread the Dharma in this world for these few decades we have here and make the human world a bit more imbued with Buddha nature a bit better. Specifically, I have now established basically a non-profit public welfare organization, which is the Food Safety Association. We try our best to provide group purchases for everyone free of charge and test for pesticides or other such substances so as to minimize the harm to everyone as much as possible. Our resources are limited. We can only test for pesticides and few people are involved. A few days ago, the first batch of vegetables was delivered to agricultural gardens and communities at Peking University, and feedback has been very positive. Now I'm thinking, how can we keep this going, expand it, and do it well? I also have a concern here, which is that what we're doing is actually very difficult. And at the beginning, it was hard for many people to understand us. They think it's a good thing, but wonder how we can do it when it's so challenging. So here, I'd like to ask the Master for some guidance. If I'm practicing cultivation in the world by doing good deeds, how should we continue progressing forward so that we can keep going further down this path in the future, rather than having it end prematurely? Thank you, Master.
Very good indeed, and excellent. You've considered things quite thoroughly and carefully, and your understanding and insight is also very deep and profound, truly. I personally think and believe regarding your two important questions raised, the first one particularly needs addressing. No matter what kind of collective, group, or organization you find yourself involved with in the future, it's not strictly necessary or required to use Buddhist or any particular religious theory and teachings to educate and guide people properly. As long as all employees and all members take kindness as their guiding principle and standard in their actions, and use kindness as their personal guiding principle in life, which is truly something that everyone can easily accept and agree with. So in the past, when I was in Yunnan, in Sichuan, and in some other places such as those regions, some successful entrepreneurs and business owners and some charitable groups would often regularly provide education and teachings about love and compassion. They would offer this kind of loving education and training to all their staff members over the long term consistently. Even now, including in the Han regions today, perhaps in some groups, people study the standards for being a good student and child, Dizigui. If there is such an educational atmosphere and environment, I think it should be helpful and beneficial for people's hearts and minds. That's the first question. The second question you just mentioned about some of the darker aspects of society nowadays, and you gave one or two specific examples as well. For those of us present here, especially in today's society, it is often the case that people who have been through a great deal are particularly clear and aware about this. The reason for this is that we currently lack a sense of faith or belief. Without faith, as it is also stated in the Nirvana Sutra, people who do not understand the existence of future lives are capable of any evil. The most frightening thing about a person is not knowing about future lives, because you only care about the present moment, about your own goals for living comfortably. In hospitals, for example, someone might prescribe a lot of fake medicine intentionally. For their own benefit, they deliberately treat human life as a plaything carelessly. And in schools today, they don't even consider students' moral education or wisdom at all seriously. They just want to make money and engage in many things that are not in accordance with the rules, including, as you just mentioned, some of the repair shops nowadays, or in many factories that manufacture vehicles, machinery, and so on, pharmaceutical factories, large-scale industrial factories, and food processing factories. These are extremely frightening places. If we were to truly understand the inside stories and hidden details of all food companies that exist today, one by one, maybe no one would ever dare to eat anymore, seriously. Because people are desperately trying to make money for their own benefit. They can run all kinds of advertisements and buy off all sorts of connections. They can use all kinds of different methods and channels, utilizing a variety of approaches and strategies to make money for themselves in various ways. Other than that, they have no conscience. Without a conscience for our society, including to our physical and mental health, it brings immeasurable harm. This is indeed a fact and reality, but to completely change and transform such a societal trend using the ideas of just a few individuals is quite difficult and challenging. However, I personally think that many people here today should pay more attention to public welfare organizations in the future. This is very important. A couple of days ago, I also attended the International Philanthropy Forum. There were many people from Peking University, Beijing Normal University, and Tsinghua University there, as well as professors from other universities. Their thinking is very clear, including some thoughts and perspectives regarding current national legislation that is currently in effect, as well as additional perspectives. In the future, we should have a more organized and managed approach. We should utilize scientific methods in an effective manner to establish many public welfare organizations. The power of such organizations is tremendous. If an individual just wants to donate a little money or do some occasional good deeds, the impact is not particularly significant or substantial at all. So I sincerely hope that, including some intellectuals from Peking University here, I perhaps may not be able to help you financially or in other practical ways. But psychologically and mentally, after all, I have spent so many years, truly a considerable amount of time, in the academy studying. So when it comes to psychological counseling or guidance on religion and modern knowledge systems, we can all work together. In the future, our sole and primary goal will truly be to help others. Other than that, there are no personal demands. Such organizations are extremely important and play a vital role in today's modern society. In the past, as everyone knows and is well aware, due to a variety of different and complex reasons, government departments were often quite apprehensive. But now, as China is becoming increasingly more actively involved internationally, in this kind of climate and situation on the global stage, things are fundamentally different from before. Now there is a genuine sense of openness in the atmosphere. In fact, in such an open society, we should have many, many charitable organizations in our local communities, just like those abroad. With these charitable organizations, there are people around us who need help, people who are poor in spirit, people who are poor materially, and many people still need help in all kinds of ways. At this time, living in such a world, we are not, I often think this way, we are not living just for ourselves. We should live for all people, even if it means doing just a little bit, bit by bit. This is a sense of responsibility we have. In this way, I think, if we all come together in the future, you really don't need to worry, and you don't need to be anxious about what you might lose personally. Actually, those things aren't that important. If someone truly performs good deeds for others selflessly, there may be perhaps some misunderstandings or lack of understanding and appreciation about them for a while temporarily, and so on and forth. But gradually, little by little, much like the sun slowly emerging from behind the clouds, they will shine brightly with dazzling light. We should help those people with whom we have a connection.
Thank you, Master, and thank you all for your encouragement to me.
Hello everyone, I am a graduate student in psychiatry at Peking University Health Science Center. Currently there is a principle in psychotherapy. First, the person must have the desire to seek treatment themselves. However, many people who truly have psychological problems will not usually take the initiative to seek help from a professional psychologist. Some time ago, I encountered a young man like that. At the time, he had just recently gone through a difficult breakup, and now I estimate that his situation is quite pessimistic. I can foresee his likely outcome: suicide or the development of antisocial behavior, or alternatively, he might end up as a homeless person in the future. I really want to help him. I tried to gently tell him about the kinds of delusions he had been experiencing and what kind of consequences they could lead to, but it was very hard for him to listen. So I want to ask the Master, how can we enlighten someone like this? Or is this my own problem? Should I not be so attached to helping him?
It's not just your problem, this is actually our problem, something we all share together as a group. Although he is someone suffering from heartbreak, which can be a very difficult and emotional experience, I think if everyone were to reflect on this in detail, taking a moment to truly consider what it means and how it feels, they might gain a deeper understanding of the situation. We all have a responsibility, each and every one of us. In this society, there are so many people in all kinds of suffering who are truly the ones we should reach out to and help. Actually, regarding psychological counseling, as I just mentioned, when we were in Yushu, people from all over the country, from different backgrounds, including those from Hong Kong, many psychological counselors also came, prepared to provide additional comfort to them. While comforting them, I met with several psychological experts. At that time, these experts said that during the Wenchuan earthquake, they played a very important role. Many people who were about to jump off buildings and commit suicide were persuaded not to by their counseling. But when they finally got to Yushu, they just couldn't find anyone, despite searching everywhere for people, looking all around. Just as I mentioned earlier, these people weren't really suffering mentally and didn't actually need comfort. So at that time, there was a group of psychological counseling experts who said, this time we came for nothing. It seems we can't find anyone to help. Logically speaking, with such a massive earthquake and so many people injured badly and so many families destroyed completely, psychological counseling should definitely have played a significant role. So I personally think that in today's modern world, people's strong attachment and clinging, and whether or not it's to relationships, for example, or wealth, if the attachment is too strong, then the suicide rate is quite high. I've heard that there's a lake next to Peking University in Beijing, where quite often some college students unfortunately jump in to commit suicide. And in some books and written accounts, it is mentioned that famous people, such as the renowned writer Lao Shi, also committed suicide there. Actually, these cases are mostly due to being overly attached to worldly things. I often think that if they had heard about the teachings on emptiness a bit earlier, because if you have heard the teachings on emptiness, not to mention relationships, not to mention fame or wealth, even all phenomena in the end, nothing is brought at birth, nothing is taken at death. In this mindset, there is nothing to be attached to. But for them, they might be facing certain difficulties temporarily. So having wealth or status doesn't necessarily mean happiness. Nowadays, many celebrities and officials, sometimes when you look at the whole situation, it does seem a bit pessimistic. At such times, when we gradually try to help others, maybe it will have an actual effect. Even if it doesn't, if we sincerely and wholeheartedly do our very best to help others, then that is our responsibility and duty. If we truly are powerless, then there is nothing more that we can possibly do. Even the Buddha and a Chan master from the Tang dynasty, he said, even the Buddha has 3 things he cannot do. He cannot save sentient beings with whom he has no karmic connection. So even someone as great and fully enlightened as the Buddha, there are certainly many people around us whom we simply cannot help. I've also often encountered situations where I truly have no way to help. All I can do is make aspirations, recite some verses, and silently wish in my heart, hoping I can help you in a future life, since in this life I have no way. That's all I can do. Let go.
Hello, Khenpo. Hello, everyone. I am a doctoral student in Chinese philosophy at Peking University. Now, let's take a break for some questions from outside the venue. The first question. Previously, several students signed up to participate in this discussion, but they couldn't make it this time. So they asked me to relay some questions to Khenpo on their behalf. Some of their questions are quite similar, so I'll present them together. These questions come from a few students in science and engineering and one student from the German department. They said that after studying Buddhism or traditional culture, they felt that their original majors seemed meaningless and dull. They want to know how to resolve this conflict. One Buddhist student asked how the process of learning German, how listening, speaking, reading, and writing in a foreign language can also become a form of practice. How should one contemplate this? We asked the teacher for guidance. What should be said next? She asked how to turn the process of learning German, as well as the listening, speaking, reading, and writing involved in learning a foreign language, into a form of spiritual practice, and how one should contemplate this.
All right. I might not answer this well enough. I haven't fully understood it myself yet completely. I'm still a bit confused and uncertain, honestly. As for the first question raised earlier, I personally think many people might have this similar feeling too. If you study for about 19 years continuously, say from university up to a PhD degree level, many people might end up studying for over 20 years if you count from kindergarten. Over more than 20 years of dedicated hard practice, rigorous asceticism, and careful study. But when people enter society, many of them actually find that they can't use much of it. In math, we study geometry, we learn how to solve equations, things like A plus B equals C. These principles are rarely applicable in real life. This includes some physics, chemistry, and a lot of other knowledge as well. But I think there are two ways to look at this from my point of view. One important way is that while we're studying and learning, our overall intelligence and wisdom are being enhanced and developed significantly through education and practice. In this case, a particular subject may not necessarily be useful for your job, but in fact, if your overall abilities are improved, no matter what kind of knowledge you encounter, you can draw analogies from what you already know. When you can make such insightful analogies, you possess a higher level of wisdom. So learning any new principle won't be very difficult for you. For example, college students or professors who have received higher education, when they listen to philosophical teachings on Madhyamaka, their ability to understand is completely different. Similarly, if you used to study science, but now you switch to any field in the humanities, for example, it's unlikely that everything you learned before will be fully applicable. But if your overall abilities are already quite good, you probably won't encounter major difficulties in between. But there's another important reason. As everyone knows and understands, in China, the economic reforms have been very successful and effective. From the 1980s to now today, if it weren't for the reforms and opening up policies at that time, and many other significant reforms implemented, people's material living standards today would not have improved so much. However, when it comes to the topic of education reform, as some people have said, the previous revolution actually cut off China's own lifeline, its traditional culture. There is this kind of saying. So at that time, the teachings of Confucius and Mencius, many of you probably don't know much about them. I remember very clearly the time of the Criticize Lin, Criticize Confucius campaign. Confucius was treated as a figure of myth and superstition and was publicly denounced. After all that harsh criticism, it's now quite challenging to restore things properly. So whether it's universities or high schools nowadays, a lot of the knowledge that is taught in them actually offers very little in terms of education on character and the development of conscience. Personally, I think it's quite limited in its scope. When we look at some of the textbooks, they're either about war or they cover some extremely dry and abstract theories of the world. That's why many intellectuals nowadays are calling for us to include, as much as possible, knowledge that is useful for society and for how we conduct ourselves in life into our courses. In Tibetan Buddhism and Tibetan education, from a young age, it's all about how to be a good person. There is more emphasis on education about how to act according to one's conscience and do good deeds. So it's actually quite difficult for us to change this all of a sudden. Both ourselves and others are inevitably caught in this kind of predicament. Now, as for your second question, regarding the so-called study and practice or textual contemplation, I think this is truly necessary. In our Vajrayana teachings, whether it's writing, reciting scriptures, or even eating, there are methods where you maintain the right awareness and mindfulness, mindfully visualizing yourself in an unwavering meditative state. There are indeed such practices, but for most people, this is very difficult. For example, whether you're driving, walking, or perhaps doing any kind of activity, to always remain continuously in a luminous and clear meditative state, or to always be constantly in a state of wanting and aspiring to do good deeds and acts. If you practice in this way, no matter what you are doing, maintain your practice within the state of cultivation. Other than that, there may not be a separate method, a practice that lets you meditate while writing, for example, though such a method may not exist.
Thank you, Khenpo. The second question might be a bit more significant. He asks how one can attain the realization of seeing one's true nature. I don't know if it's convenient for Khenpo to answer this.
Not convenient. Maybe I should keep it secret. Just kidding.
Could you briefly talk about it for a moment?
In the tradition of Chan Buddhism, this is commonly called realizing the true nature of mind. In our own Dzogchen tradition, we refer to this profound experience as directly pointing out the nature of mind. In the Pure Land school, when one reaches this state, it can also be called single-minded concentration. Actually, these terms are not exactly the same, but in terms of their literal meaning, they all refer to reaching the highest state. Therefore, realizing the nature of mind is often mentioned in the biographies of many great masters of Chan Buddhism and other practitioners. It frequently appears in their biographies as well. This means that through a particularly simple and skillful method, one comes to fully recognize the original, primordial, luminous, and inseparable state of emptiness of one's own mind. Whether you call it enlightenment or realization, when you actually experience this profound state, it cannot be described or expressed in words. Of course, as for the methods and techniques, one approach is the gradual path of study and practice in the exoteric tradition, step by step. Another approach is to rely on the careful and compassionate guidance of a qualified teacher. Another way is to read the biographies of great spiritual masters and revered saints yourself, and to sincerely pray to the Guru and the Three Jewels for wisdom and support. Through such means, in the end, your own mind becomes clear and thoroughly understood. When you reach this deep understanding, although it cannot really be expressed in words clearly, you should truly know it fully. And this knowing is not just an occasional fleeting feeling of happiness or comfort. It's not like that at all. It is a very stable conviction, such that even if all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas were to appear, or if anyone else tried to really change my view, it would never be changed at all. One of Master Tsongkhapa's teachers was the Venerable Rendawa. In the conclusion of his commentary on the Madhyamaka text, Venerable Rendawa once said clearly, "Even if millions of wise and learned people said my view was completely wrong and mistaken, I would not waver or change at all." He had already reached a very high level and was extremely confident. So, when it comes to realizing the nature of mind, I think there are some truly fascinating and remarkable stories to be discovered in the biographies of eminent monks from China, a collection that has captivated readers for centuries. That is why many university students should consider taking the time to read and reflect on these stories from time to time. Actually, in this world, apart from the various worldly things and matters we deal with every day, nowadays people are especially fond of celebrities, popular pop stars, and talented dancers. But in fact, we don't necessarily need to seek those out. We should think about how the great masters attained enlightenment. By doing so, the major and most significant questions and uncertainties that have persisted throughout the entirety of my life would finally be resolved. This is very important.
Thank you, Khenpo. Next, I have a small question from my own practice experience. How can I eliminate arrogance and anger completely? How can I fundamentally and permanently get rid of these two stubborn habits entirely, instead of only feeling ashamed and remorseful after these serious faults are exposed publicly, and then repenting and feeling very upset and distressed about it afterwards?
Hold on a moment. You see, I still keep on. Not bad. The questions you asked today are actually pretty good. After more than 2 hours, I still feel okay. So your questions are really good. Otherwise, sometimes when the questions aren't very good, I start to feel a bit annoyed inside. But today I still feel very confident. Are you tired? Not tired? That's really great. Let me drink a little water and I'll answer you right away. But now let's think about it. I think it's still somewhat necessary to have these kinds of DVDs. For example, today, the questions raised by many of you intellectuals, these might be questions that many people have on their minds. So today we are here together in a small group setting. Now, I personally think, like Master Jing Kong and others, they use modern technology and tools effectively. There is a kind of dual value and benefit. People present here also gain certain benefits and insights, and besides us here, future listeners and viewers worldwide will also gain certain benefits. So sometimes we ourselves feel a bit embarrassed, like it's meaningless. I often have this feeling myself. But later I thought, no matter what others say to me, or how I evaluate myself in various ways, it doesn't really matter. As long as it brings even a little benefit to others, then it's worth doing. In the beginning, I really didn't want to appear in front of the camera at all. I just hated it deeply. But then I thought carefully. We always say we're studying and practicing Mahayana Buddhism teachings. If we're studying Mahayana Buddhism, then as long as it brings even a little benefit to everyone, we should still give what we can. That's how I started to think about it. About your question just now, well, I think my memory should be just fine, right? There really shouldn't be any problem with it, no problem. You were talking about anger and arrogance, right? My memory used to be pretty good, but later on, because of serious heart disease and some other serious health issues and conditions, it had a bit of an impact and negative effect. As for the arrogance and anger you mentioned earlier before, there are two very effective ways and methods to counteract anger properly. One is the exoteric method of counteracting it properly and directly, the exoteric method approach. I suggest you study the chapter on patience from The Way of the Bodhisattva thoroughly and repeatedly. Once you have studied the chapter on patience, you will be able to analyze in greater detail through its insightful theories exactly how your anger is gradually destroyed. That's why many great masters and eminent monks from abroad, when they travel to Western countries and do not have enough time to teach The Way of the Bodhisattva, they will simply take the chapter on patience and carefully explain it in detail to everyone present. In Vajrayana, the best method to destroy anger is to directly observe the true nature of your anger in that very moment. For example, I'm extremely angry at a certain person. When I get really angry, I sometimes look to see where my anger is inside. Is it in my stomach or in my head, or is it in some other part of my body? When you observe like this, you realize that what we call anger is actually just an illusion created by our own discriminating thoughts. In reality, it doesn't have any true substance at all. Both the exoteric and esoteric schools have their own unique methods to counteract this. As for arrogance, I think the only way in the past, I was sometimes arrogant myself. I thought my memory, my wisdom, and my abilities in all aspects surpassed others. But later, I realized that in fact, we are all servants of sentient beings, and compared to the selfless dedication of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, and great masters of the past, no matter how truly remarkable or exceptionally outstanding we think we are, none of it is worth even a trace of arrogance whatsoever. There is not even the slightest reason to be arrogant about any of it at all. So, among all sentient beings, I am the most humble and the most pitiable one, deserving of compassion. Therefore, I should not harbor any arrogance that places me above others. So whenever I think of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the actions and intentions of those who truly benefited sentient beings in the past, I feel especially ashamed of myself. My selfishness is so strong and my attachment to self is so heavy, and the afflictions and discriminating thoughts within my own mind stream are so strong. So with all this knowledge and understanding, on what basis and grounds could I possibly give rise to arrogance or have such an attitude and mindset towards others? Thank you, Khenpo. I wonder if any of the fellow practitioners have any more questions. We have one last question. That's all good for today. I really have nothing else to do at this moment. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Khenpo. I am a doctoral student in the Department of Philosophy, studying Chinese philosophy and researching Buddhism. I have two questions today that I would like to ask Khenpo for guidance on. The first is, what is the relationship between theoretical study and practical cultivation in Buddhism? Because for those of us who study philosophy and religion, we may have read quite a lot of scriptures. That's the first question. The second question is, I would like you to talk about it from the perspective of the three bodies, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, the relationship between exoteric and esoteric Buddhist practices.
The relationship between theory and practice is very important. But in reality, I know quite a few people in higher education, including some from religious studies departments and some lecturers at Buddhist colleges, who have a very rich knowledge of theory, No matter how truly remarkable or exceptionally outstanding we think we are, none of it is worth even a trace of arrogance whatsoever. There is not even the slightest reason to be arrogant about any of it at all. So, among all sentient beings, I am the most humble and the most pitiable one, deserving of compassion. When they talk, everything always sounds perfectly logical and reasonable, and they can explain just about anything, but in reality they have never actually practiced or applied it themselves. As a result, practice often becomes separated and unlinked from theory. So whether it's Buddhist scholars or some practitioners, in many cases, they also have this problem. For example, some people, in terms of theory, especially in the debates of Tibetan Buddhism, are extremely skilled. But if they have never actually practiced themselves, then when it comes time to leave this world, they have never experienced any real transformation in their hearts. Such people are at a complete loss when faced with life and death or major issues. This phenomenon is quite a serious matter. So I think that nowadays, whether it's university teachers or students, while learning about Buddhism, they should also put it into actual practice in their daily lives. Just like in Tibetan Buddhism, the theoretical understanding and the actual real-world practice go hand in hand. You could say they're integrated. Why is it that so many people nowadays are especially fond of Tibetan Buddhism? Actually, it's not all just blind admiration. People in Western countries think this way as well. In Tibetan Buddhism, we first have theoretical explanations. Then, there are corresponding methods of practice as well as ritual supports that are provided. All of these elements are thoughtfully integrated together as a unified whole. It's just like a product in the world that comes with its own complete and well-designed packaging. That's why in Tibet, we refer to it as hearing, contemplation, and practice. Hearing and contemplation are similar to what intellectuals in today's academic and scholarly circles generally do. They have a really good grasp of the theory, but if they lack actual practice, sometimes it really doesn't have any effect on themselves. And when it comes to making a real contribution to society and public welfare, there are also certain difficulties. So in the future, many of our students and learners, including those who are scholars in religious studies from various backgrounds, will be involved. When you are learning about these things, you should also engage in contemplation and practice yourself. This point should be considered very important. The second topic is the three bodies. Regarding the three bodies, there is actually not much difference between the exoteric and esoteric schools. In the exoteric text, ornament of clear realization, the merits of the Dharma body, the enjoyment body, and the emanation body are all thoroughly discussed and explained. In fact, the Dharma body is the true nature of all phenomena, just like space itself. The enjoyment body is like the radiant sun and the shining moon appearing in the vast expanse of space, and the emanation body is the beautiful light that it emits. So from a worldly perspective, what we see now is actually this very light. This refers to the activities of the emanation body of our teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha. In fact, it is related to the unobstructed space and the sun and moon. Some sutras and treatises use this kind of analogy for contemplation and practice. Moreover, in Vajrayana Buddhism, the true nature of our own mind is essentially emptiness, which is called the Dharmakaya. When the wondrous power of its emptiness is not abandoned, the clear and luminous aspect is called the Sambhogakaya, the inseparable non-dual state where appearance and emptiness are not apart and not combined, and which pervades all sentient beings, is called the Nirmanakaya. Therefore, when we speak of the three bodies, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, we should not separate them into three distinct entities. In fact, using the terms essence as emptiness and nature as luminosity, and also within all realms of sentient beings, manifesting in different forms to help sentient beings, is called the Buddha's Nirmanakaya, or emanation body. From this perspective, there is actually no difference. Of course, from the point of view of pith instructions, as I just mentioned, regarding the recognition of one's own nature, this is a teaching of Vajrayana, and it is a rather profound state.
I've heard Chan Buddhism focuses on cultivating the Dharmakaya. Vajrayana says Buddhahood is possible now by cultivating three bodies. I'm not sure what is your view on this perspective?
This kind of statement probably doesn't have any real basis, does it? Because in Vajrayana as well, the three bodies, Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya, are non-dual. Once realization is attained, all can manifest. The essence of Chan Buddhism's realization of mind and nature, the Dharmakaya, is the Dharma realm of all phenomena. In its manifestation, this Dharma realm differs in benefiting oneself and others. So, it's hard to say there are two completely different viewpoints. This claim isn't necessarily valid. You may continue to ask questions, as Khenpo just mentioned. If you don't have any questions, don't force yourself.
Respected and esteemed Khenpo, dear and honored fellow practitioners, I wish a very good afternoon to each and every one of you all. I am a staff member of the Lax Education Foundation. Right next door to this room is an inviting Christian fellowship hall. As a Buddhist myself, I can very clearly feel and sense that they truly have a very strong and passionate missionary spirit. In my view, I think Buddhism is about benefiting oneself and others, but many times I feel that Buddhists themselves lack a certain willingness to share with others and a spirit of spreading the teachings, especially when you look at why Christianity has such a wide reach and coverage. I would like to ask Khenpo for some advice. How can we Buddhists further strengthen this missionary spirit so that the Dharma can truly benefit more people? Okay, thank you very much.
It's like this. We know that Christianity is indeed something we can genuinely learn from. Their missionary spirit, as well as their various methods and approaches, as I just mentioned in principle, there is truly no real need for followers to repeat the history that once happened in the past, where believers fought each other and refused to cooperate just because of their faith. That's unnecessary. But in reality, a lot of data about Christianity shows that over the course of 50 years in the Han regions, a rather significant portion, as reported according to certain statistics, have converted to Christianity. They have such arrangements and plans which Buddhist followers basically lack. There is even internal scheming and discord among Buddhists themselves. Let alone spreading the teachings, they even slander each other. They slander this teacher, slander that follower. This is unreasonable. Especially for some lay practitioners, I think that when it comes to the faults or shortcomings of monastics, or even the faults of many other people, it is best to try not to spread them around to others, because as lay people, they have their own personal responsibilities and obligations, and beyond that, it is generally unnecessary. So as we just discussed, how should Buddhism be spread? In the future, we should, on one hand, learn from some of the styles and practices of Christianity, and at the same time, as I just mentioned, the spirit and wisdom of Buddhism is indeed a practical solution and answer for today's modern society and world. If we go door to door, giving people money directly, it may not necessarily help or benefit them truly. But if we truly share and spread the wisdom of Buddhism to every household, it can truly and genuinely change their lives. Over the past few years, I have been sharing with everyone through DVDs, studying texts like the Bodhicariavatara and other teachings. Some people might say nice things to me in person. Some people have truly gained personal benefit and said that through such study, their lives have changed and they have found the courage to face challenges. This is something that brings us great joy. So I hope that everyone here, just as I mentioned earlier, in the future, whether it is in an organized, structured manner or in a more informal, casual way, we should all have a sense of responsibility and not just an immediate or emergency mindset. When we encounter an earthquake, a disaster, or someone in pain, everyone comes together to help. But usually there is no regular practice, no long-term spirit of helping all beings. In this way, we may say this is Mahayana Buddhism, benefiting countless sentient beings to the ends of the earth. But in reality, if we don't even have a broad altruistic spirit ourselves, if we lack the necessary courage and inner strength to truly inspire others, it is truly shameful. So today, I can't really offer any particularly good methods or guidance. But it would be best if, in the future, here in Beijing, within a student group like this, everyone could have some kind of organization to figure out how to communicate, how to learn together, occasionally holding some internal, small-scale, not very high profile, but rather more low-key and intimate gatherings. We don't need fame or recognition. We don't need to do any media publicity or promotion. What truly matters is that in real life, When we actually do something practical for people's minds and to help others, this is benefiting sentient beings, and it is also spreading the Dharma and benefiting others. So on one hand, you need to study yourself. If you haven't thought about it, that's another matter. But if you do consider it, actually intellectuals have a lot of things they should be doing. I think there are especially many responsibilities, and many of these things need to be done together by everyone. It's not about one person quietly, anonymously delivering something on their own. It's not like that. Nowadays, society is in the information age. Everyone should actively encourage ideals through organization and cooperation. We should promote a certain spirit. Only in this way can there be a bright future.
There's another question. I know, Khenpo, that you are extremely busy. I feel that for myself as well because I have a lot of work-related tasks. There are also many other matters in various aspects, and sometimes I do feel mentally and physically exhausted. So I'd like to ask you, Khenpo, in such a busy situation, how are you able to better regulate your body and mind? How do you manage to take on your responsibilities and duties with even greater courage and diligence? Thank you.
Whether it's my daily practice or in my everyday life, I am indeed very busy. But even though I'm busy, I always try my very best. As long as I still have a breath left in me, my life's goal is to help sentient beings as much as I possibly can. This isn't just something I say, it's truly and sincerely what I feel deep in my heart. So in this kind of modern life, I also constantly worry about my own body and mind, gradually being tainted and corrupted by all kinds of negative habits and influences in society today. So when I'm at the Larangar daily, I basically try to get the necessary things and tasks done in the morning hours. In the quiet and peaceful afternoon, as much as possible, I set aside some valuable time specifically for translation work and for my own personal practice. When I get up early in the morning, I recite some sutras and mantras quietly. When working and teaching, I often encounter difficulties and misunderstandings from others around me. At those difficult times, I face them calmly and peacefully with equanimity. I don't let a small issue I encounter today cause me to suffer for half a day or feel sad and depressed for a long time afterwards. If I did allow that, my emotions might never return to normal and balanced again. So as someone who has practiced and studied for many years, I see obstacles and setbacks as normal in life. When I face them, I try to see them as blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Even negative experiences have blessings, and I try to make them part of my path. For example, when others create obstacles for me, I do my best to dedicate merit to them. If what I do doesn't succeed, that too might be a blessing from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. For now, it may seem like a significant obstacle, but ultimately, the fact that I didn't succeed is actually the best result of my practice. That's how I approach it. I don't know if I'll have the ability to help more sentient beings in the future. Whether I do or not, as long as I am alive, I will always do my utmost, using whatever little strength and energy I have, to dedicate it wholeheartedly to those sentient beings with whom I have a connection. I am truly very grateful to everyone here. Today, I genuinely feel that our communication has been especially good. I sincerely hope that we can always treat everyone we meet with our own love and kindness. Thank you all very much.